Senator Edwards, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf. Thanks for having me.
I want to play this little clip, but John McCain just a little while ago responded to this uproar involving the appeasement comments, and he directly responded to Barack Obama's earlier statement from today. Listen to this.
I have some news for Senator Obama. Talking, not even with soaring rhetoric, unconditional, in unconditional meetings with a man who calls Israel a stinking corpse and arms terrorists who kill Americans will not convince Iran to give up its nuclear program. It is reckless.
And that was just the beginning. I don't know if you had a chance to hear his speech, but he is certainly not backing down at all. I wonder if you want to weigh in.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think from a more thoughtful perspective, instead of all this anger, I think that, number one, it really is beneath the dignity of the President of the United States to make these kind of cheap political statements when he's in Israel celebrating the 60th anniversary of an extraordinary country. And it's in the history of the United States, the President does not do these kind of things. That's first. And then secondly, it's an amazing thing to listen to the continuation of fear-mongering. I mean, we saw it back in 2004 when I was running for vice president, trying to scare the American people into believing if you elect a Democrat, it's going to be a disaster for the country. It is utter nonsense. And luckily, we're now in a very different place. I mean, we know what the American people think of George Bush. We know what they think of this mess of a war in Iraq. And his foreign policy, Wolf, has been a complete and utter disaster. And moving to the more important thing for this election, since Bush is not running in this election, is John McCain embraces it. I mean, the McCain foreign policy is virtually identical to the George Bush foreign policy. And if you think about those two things in combination and compare it to what's happened over the last 8 years, anybody in America paying attention knows we need a change. That's what Senator Obama is going to bring. And I would add, just as an afterthought, what we really need is visionary leadership that understands the importance of American strength, but also understands that if we don't work and cooperate and engage in serious principled diplomacy with the rest of the world, the huge problems facing America and the rest of the world, from climate change to extreme poverty, all these issues that we're faced with cannot be solved.
Well, what about the argument they make that Barack Obama, and you were at one of those debates, said he would meet unconditionally with tyrants like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad without preconditions? Those were his words, and you hear the response from President Bush and John McCain. What are they going to talk about with someone who calls Israel a stinking corpse?
Well, we all think exactly the same thing about Ahmadinejad. I actually have discussed this issue in depth with Senator Obama. His view about this is, I think, virtually identical to mine and to Senator Clinton's, which is all the work would have to be done to ensure that something constructive could come out of such a meeting. But in the history of America, Wolf, we've been successful. Look at what's happened. Let's give you an example. The Bush administration and George Bush derides Senator Obama, although not by name. They were clearly referring to him. And at the same time, over the last couple of years, one of the great foreign policy achievements that they're now talking about is what's happened with North Korea. That was the direct result of direct discussions between the United States of America and North Korea and the leadership of North Korea, one of the countries in the axis of evil. This administration engages in ongoing contact with the leadership of Iran. They do it all the time. And the notion that we're not going to engage our enemies is utter nonsense. And what we have to do is we have to do it in a thoughtful, responsible way. That is exactly what Barack Obama is talking about doing. And the American people are going to have a dramatic choice come this November. If they want 4 more years of George Bush, then they ought to vote for John McCain. If they believe we can do better than this, they ought to vote for Barack Obama.
I guess there's one thing about one point about having a diplomatic dialogue at relatively lower levels or senior levels, but it's another thing for the President of the United States to be willing to meet unconditionally with another tyrant, if you will. And that's the criticism that McCain keeps making about Barack Obama. Hillary Clinton herself at one of those debates, I don't remember if you did, said she thought it was naive or inappropriate to make a flat-out commitment like that. I'm sure you remember the discussion.
Well, first of all, Wolf, that's not what George Bush said. What George Bush said is that what we were talking about doing, the Democrats, was effectively appeasement. And then he compared it to what happened with Hitler just before World War II. I mean, that's an extraordinary and deplorable thing to say. I mean, it really is, especially coming from a man who's been an absolute disaster, arguably the worst president in American history on foreign policy. And so that's the first thing. And then John McCain defends him. I mean, I think that what Senator Obama's saying, if instead of engaging in this high-level political rhetoric, angry political rhetoric, what Senator Obama's saying is actually very thoughtful. What he's saying is we are going to continue to engage countries like Iran that we don't have a friendly relationship with at a diplomatic level. And if it appears that it would be useful for me as president to meet with the leader of any other country, then I'll make that decision and judgment at the time. And if I think it's useful, I'll do it. What in the world is wrong with that? That makes all the sense in the world.
All right, Senator Edwards, I wanted you to stand by. I want to take a quick commercial break, but I want to continue this conversation and move on to some other issues. Some of us were surprised, Senator Edwards. Monday night, you were on Larry King Live, and you said you weren't ready to endorse anyone. Wednesday night, you appear in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with Barack Obama and make this endorsement. What happened in between that convinced you it was time to go public?
Well, I had made the decision about who I would support because, for one thing, I had to vote in the North Carolina primary, and I voted for Senator Obama in the North Carolina primary. But I just came to the conclusion, basically in the 24 hours before we made the announcement on Wednesday night in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that it was time for me to speak out. It was more gut than anything else.
And what about Elizabeth, your wife? Is she on board with you? Is she formally part of the endorsement of Barack Obama?
Elizabeth, I think, announced months ago publicly that she was not going to make an endorsement, that she had a very high opinion of both of these candidates, and she decided it was more important, particularly because she's so interested in the health care issue, that she stay focused on that and not on either of these candidates, particularly since we had such good candidates.
Both of you had suggested that on health care, you were closer to Hillary Clinton's plan than Barack Obama's plan. Is that still true as far as that one issue is concerned?
Senator Clinton's plan was virtually identical to my plan. So, yes, that is true. But I've talked to Senator Obama about this, and I have absolutely no doubt about his commitment to achieving universal health care. He cares deeply about it. He's worked on it for a very long time, and I'm totally convinced about his resolve and his determination about that.
I'm sure you had a lot of conversations with him leading up to the endorsement. I remember the exchange you had with him when I moderated that debate in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I'm going to play a little clip of that, and I want to see if the two of you have made up on this issue.
The question is, why would you over 100 times vote present?
John,
I mean, every one of us, you've criticized Hillary, you've criticized me for our votes. We've cast hundreds and hundreds of votes. What you're criticizing her for, by the way, you've done to us.
I'm sure you remember that exchange.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't the only one we had. You know, we were in a tough competitive race, Wolf. I mean, that's what's been going on with Senator Clinton and Senator Obama over the last few months. But that went on for over a year. I mean, I was fighting for the nomination with everything I had, trying to do it honestly and with principle, but challenging him in ways that I thought were legitimate. He did the same thing with me, by the way. But at the end of the day, and I just have to say, you haven't asked me about this, but I feel the need to say it. The extent to which I admire and am impressed with Senator Clinton has done nothing but grow since I've gotten out of this race. I've gotten to know her better. I've talked to her on the phone many times. She's been to visit and talk with me. She is a fine human being and an extraordinary leader for the country. But I do believe that given where we are, where America is at this time in its history, that we desperately need a change agent as president. And I think Senator Obama's in a great position to give us that change.
I know you've effectively ruled yourself out as a possible vice presidential nominee. You've been there. You've done that, as all of us remember. Well, what about Hillary Clinton? You've been effusive in your praise for her. Would that help unite the party to see Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton on that ticket together?
You know, I'm just not presumptuous enough to suggest to either Senator Clinton or Senator Obama what they should do about that. I think that that's a judgment that I believe Senator Obama will be the nominee, that I believe Senator Obama will have to make with all things considered. And Senator Clinton, if it were offered to her, would have to decide whether she wants to do it. Any leadership position that Senator Clinton can occupy in the United States of America is good for this country.
I know you're deeply committed to the issue of ending poverty in our country. What commitment from Barack Obama did you get in order to win your endorsement? I assume you discussed this issue of poverty at length with him. Did he make a specific commitment that as president he would do something about it?
Oh, yeah. And it would take longer than we have this show.
Give me one specific promise that he made to you.
Okay. I'm chairing a new campaign called Half in 10, cutting the poverty rate in America in half in the next 10 years. There are a number of substantive proposals, raising the minimum wage, expansion of the earned income.
Senator Edwards, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Wolf, so much for having me.
We'll see you soon.